Hi everyone. Hope this Monday is finding you doing well. Hopefully you had a good weekend. We had a surprise when we woke up here this morning in New York. It had snowed overnight, so thought we were actually getting somewhat to spring, but I guess not. Although it's been sunny here good part of the day, so it's most of the snow's melting off. So hopefully, wherever you're at, you didn't get a bunch of snow overnight like we did. But just wanted to talk to you a little bit about our work last week and a little bit about what we've got coming up and some of the information from the quiz. So last week we talked about HIPAA, and we're going to continue that conversation later this week, Wednesday night. Going to talk a little bit about some case studies that hopefully will be interesting. I think the discussion was lively and interesting, and hopefully, especially as you're going out and going to be going into the work world, or as you are in the work world in healthcare, you'll find some of these case studies interesting because they're actual legitimate things that have occurred out there, and they're it's hopefully we can have a discussion about some of the issues. And as one of the reasons that I wanted to wait, used to do this case study discussion during the week. That's why it was actually found in week 4, but not everyone, a lot of people in this class actually are pretty familiar with HIPAA because you are working in healthcare. But for folks that aren't familiar with HIPAA, it's hard to have a good understanding of all of the rules and kind of what the right answer might be on some of these case studies to have a real in-depth discussion about any of them. So by giving you kind of the week to get through the material, take a look at it, and then this week we'll have a discussion about some of these case studies. For folks that weren't real familiar with HIPAA, then obviously by this week hopefully you have a better understanding of privacy and security and a little bit of that breach notification info, and you'll be in good shape to have a discussion about that info come Wednesday night. I know that that wasn't everybody's first choice. It was a good bunch of it was a majority of people's first choice, but or one of their choices. I shouldn't say first choice. I didn't ask you to rank them, but it was a majority of people's choice. But if for some reason, if you have to work or you have another commitment and you're not able to be there, we will look to record it. I always try and record it using Blackboard Collaborate. Does allow us to record them as opposed to Google Hangout, which we cannot record. So that's why we've made the move to Collaborate. But I can't, I can't guarantee that it'll be recorded because there is always the potential issue of technical difficulties. But if for some reason it does not record or we cannot record it, there is another secondary assignment that I'll have you complete because this is a 4-credit activity, the synchronous assignment. So I do want to talk a little bit about the discussion. Great options that folks brought up for breaches in privacy or security. And I think the big thing that you found in looking for those breaches, there's kind of two sides to the coin. Privacy breach is going to be, and oftentimes when there's a security breach, there's also a privacy breach. But a privacy breach is going to be when somebody has maybe somebody's surfing the electronic health record, or maybe it's a place that still is using some paper documents. So a lot of places have a hybrid record or a record where a paper document is used for purposes in the office. Maybe patient info is signed in on a paper document, then scanned and immediately shredded. But maybe somehow those paper documents get lost in the office or get shared in some inappropriate way. So a lot of those things are privacy violations. So it's not necessarily a security violation, but a privacy violation. That protected health information, which could be anything from the patient's name and date of birth to a piece of diagnostic information. And keep that in mind because HIPAA doesn't just say I'm sharing info with someone else that doesn't need to know that info, that Susie has diabetes or Susie has a mental health condition. it could be this just that I'm sharing with someone that doesn't need to know who Susie is. That in itself is a HIPAA violation. So there's I think it's 17 or 18. I don't remember off the top of my head. I should, but I don't right now. 17 or 18 points of information that are considered protected health information. So sharing that info is considered a privacy breach. But the security rule is obviously protects electronic. So privacy rule protects paper information, it protects electronic information, and it protects oral information. So me saying something to someone else. So I think and I'm probably giving away, I think I have an elevator one in the case studies, but you think about the elevator information or elevator conversations in the hospital or cafeteria conversations in the hospital. Those are always huge privacy issues, privacy violations. But so when you think more of the security rule, you're thinking more about situations where you have electronic information. Security rule covers electronic information, and it's about that transmission of information, or more importantly, the protection of that information. So um, you think about the uh, administrative safeguards, so having policies and procedures in place, technical safeguards, so could be anything from firewalls to encryption to access controls. All of those are technical safeguards. And administrative, technical, physical safeguards. The last one is physical. So things like locking up the computers, locking up the space, locking up the locking. One of the big things that we used to do is if you had a laptop, and when we would do teaching. So if I was when I was compliance officer, and we were going to do teaching, and if for some reason we were leaving the room between sessions, we would actually lock the laptops to the space with like these bicycle locks. So it was always a very, you have to have your administrative safeguards, your technical safeguards, but also physical safeguards of that nature to protect that electronic information. So there's all those three different pieces to make sure that that info is protected. Um, so in our discussion last week, we had lots of different breaches that folks shared with the group, and there was kind of a mix. There were some that were privacy breaches. So someone sharing information appropriately, surfing the electronic health record, those types of things. But then there were also, and actually I think probably the majority of them were this. There were security breaches, and those tend to be people getting hacked, phishing attacks, different types of cybersecurity related issues, and those are becoming more and more common, mainly because of the fact that organizations were very bad at being compliant with the security rule when it first came out. So they didn't do their appropriate risk assessment. People in IT didn't understand the rule, didn't take the time to understand it appropriately, and therefore now they're paying the price. So it's really interesting to take a look at how that has progressed over time. And as you might be able to tell, one of my favorite areas, and used to be an area that I focused on pretty exclusively. So, but ridiculously important if you're going out into the field, be it as a manager in a hospital situation, manager in a physician practice, long-term care on the payer side, regardless of what setting. HIPAA is going to continue, though you're going to start seeing more and more and more and more of those multi-million-dollar fines because the Office of Civil Rights is ramping up auditing, not decreasing it. It's actually keeps getting at a higher and higher level. So we're only going to see more and more of it. It's so important to be knowledgeable about HIPAA and how you as a leader can help to help your employees to understand and know what's right in those situations. Quiz. So 2 questions on the quiz. There were only 2 questions that anyone in the class got wrong. So I'll review these quickly. The first one was true false. Security rule requires that covered entities put in place professional safeguards to protect security. And that was false. I'm not sure what professional safeguards are. So, so that was not, like I said, the safeguards are administrative, technical, and physical. And there's no requirement that, there's no specific type of certification or professional level or anything of that nature for the safeguards that they put in place. For example, there are certain safeguards that are required and others that are, what they, let's say that they're recommended, they're not required. For example, I think that there were some folks that had uh, chosen breaches that were in the discussion boards they talked about encryption. So encryption is a great example of it's a safeguard that is just recommended. It's not something that's required under the regulations. However, in order to protect the information, we are required to protect the information. So most large organizations are going to have to encrypt their information in order to protect it. In the way that they transfer information between locations and whatnot. So sometimes we need to use our best judgment and encrypt it in order to share it via email and those types of things. So in this case, professional, that wasn't the right word to use. I'm not sure what professional was getting at, but physical, technical, administrative, those are the three types of safeguards that the security rule requires. The last question was, who do you notify if patient information was breached? So this comes out of the breach notification regulations. And the answer was actually all of the above. So you have to notify the affected individuals, so whomever had their information breached. You have to notify the Department of Health and Human Services, so the government in that case. And then for breaches over a certain size, you actually have to notify the media as well, because there are some instances where the potential exists that you may look to notify affected individuals, but you may not effectively get in touch with them. So when the government wrote the regulations way back when, they said by putting a notification in the media as well, you would be sure to get that information out to everybody that had been affected. So that was kind of their their modus operandi in that case. I think a lot of the folks in the healthcare world felt that it was more of a punitive measure by forcing breaches over a certain size. I believe it's 500 people. So if you breach more than 500 people at one time, if you breach their information, if you have a security breach of over 500 people, you have to put it in, release it to the media. That it was more of a punitive measure. But that was not the intent per the folks that wrote the regs. It was more of a notification purpose to those that had their information breached. But in this case, the answer was all of the above, because it is all of the above in those cases. So for this coming week, so those are the only two questions that folks had gotten wrong this week. For this coming week, week 5. I can't believe we're in week 5 already. It's going to be summer before we know it, hopefully. But so this week, we're actually going to we're going to kind of flip back out of law and into ethics again. We're going to take a look at some interesting things, stem cells, organ transplantation, just some interesting areas that we didn't explore when we were looking as we've looked at ethics thus far. Really neat video about stem cell fraud. I remember the first time I saw this, it made me really angry. So really neat video. It's a 60 minutes video. It's a little bit older, but very neat video about stem cell fraud. But some neat stuff that we'll take a look at. A little movie trailer from the movie John Q. I'm not sure if you've ever seen the movie John Q, but it's about transplantation and a child that was refused due to lack of insurance. It's the ultimate make the hospital administrators look evil kind of movie. There's plenty of those, and in this case, they probably were pretty evil. But so it's interesting, interesting movie and an interesting kind of a setting to explore. The finance of healthcare, the finance of transplantation, in conjunction with ethics and whatnot. So a few interesting things to talk about, and then our written assignment this week is based on that 60-minute stem cell video. So take a look at our info, obviously, and then Wednesday night, if you're watching this before Wednesday night, we'll be having our synchronous session again about HIPAA. So just bring your interest in willingness to chat and what you've learned from last week about HIPAA and what you know from previously, and that'll be it for this week. So looking forward to seeing everyone later this week and talking with everyone on the discussion boards. Thanks so much.